I'm not looking for that. I don't want to be the AI czar of anything. I'm happy to just be the AI czar of making sure that I get my recycling out on Thursday. And I'm barely holding that role down well. I'm getting excited for our trip to Portugal. My wife is excited as well. She's coming along. And for our audience, just to let you guys know, Steve and I are going to be going to Portugal, and we're going to be guesting on Backstage Tech with George Helgeson. He's also going to be guesting on our podcast, and so we're going to be doing some very.
And by the way, George has an excellent podcast as well. He's just a few episodes in, I think, Ian. Like, I've listened to a couple of them, but I think he's just a few episodes in. But great interviews, great studio, and like, what an honor! Like, what an like, we're 5 episodes into UBA, and we get invited to go to Portugal to record our pod with another podcaster. Like I said to you at the very beginning of all this, if my mom listens to it, success. But we got invited to go to Portugal in Lisbon, which, by the way, I have not been. I think you've been.
Once.
So,
yeah.
Once. So to your point, my wife's a planner. Listen, my friend, we've got some of the hottest, coolest restaurants we're going to go to. We've got wine tours. Like, we're not going to have time to do podcasting. We're going to be visiting.
Excellent. You know what? I haven't done a podcast hungover yet. I think that could be, who knows? Maybe it's an improvement. Could be an improvement.
It could be. You know what? And I will say too, we should probably tell listeners, usually we kind of give like a funny little one-liner hint into what we're talking about today, but we're just going to go right into it. We're actually spending this episode, because we're 5 in, and we're spending this episode on UBA, Unsolicited Business Advice podcast. We're going to give ourselves advice on what we could do better with it. And I think we've got a fantastic episode coming. But let me just start off, Ian, before you jump in, because I know you've got some background and some data and some things like that as well. All jokes aside, I just want to thank you for inviting me to join you on this. I definitely will be the first person to say, and I told you this as well, I was skeptical of it. I for sure loved your newsletter of the I thought that was just brilliant, and how you send that out, and just super timely, super bold to be able to do that. But I have enjoyed this immensely. Not just getting to know you better as well. I know we knew each other, in our previous sort of work lives, but getting to know you better and just going through the research on these companies and understanding them, and then providing our perspective. Anyway, thank you, my friend.
Thanks so much, Steve, and thanks for jumping in on this as well. It's, you're a super busy guy, and for you to put in all the effort and everything, it's been really fun. And I think we're getting better every episode. So with that in mind, let's dig into how we're doing with the UBA podcast. We're already 5 in. It's only showing 2 here, but that's when I made this little GIF. So let's talk a little bit about the idea, what the idea is and what the idea has been. It's about one company, one episode, the unfiltered strategic advice they should be paying millions for, delivered free, whether they want it or not. And the idea was that you and I would go through one company per episode, go through their background, go through their current situation, current trends, the industry that they're in, and we would actually provide our own perspective on what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, what they should be doing next. And then we would tie it together at the end with a CEO letter that we would post on LinkedIn. And why did I think that you would be the perfect person to do this with? Well, I think it all boils down to 2 things. One, credibility. I mean, you were President Chief Innovation Officer at Delvinia. You have 20 years in tech and innovation. You've got a proven track record of scaling digital businesses and actually exiting those businesses. So I wanted somebody who really could look at a company and dissect it quickly and had the credibility to do so. My own background, obviously, co-founder at Dig Insights, which I exited. I'm currently a board member of Ontario Genomics, and I have deep expertise in market research and strategy and a large follower base on LinkedIn. So that was our credibility. And then the dynamic was, I liked you. I thought you're a funny guy, smart guy. I always liked all the talks you did at events where we would see each other at events. And I thought we could do this well together.
Yeah, I think there's just on that dynamic as well. Like we're different for sure in a lot of our opinions and maybe some of our perspectives on things for sure. But there's a lot of crossover similarities, and we've also both been in the trenches building organizations. We know what these CEOs are going through, right? It doesn't matter if it's a $1 billion company or if it's a $10 million company. Like it's the same dynamics.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. In fact, sometimes it's harder when it's $10 million than when it's getting bigger. Yeah. You did some analysis using a bunch of different AI tools on the transcripts from all of our episodes. Do you want to sort of talk a little bit about what that showed?
Yeah, I ran it through a couple of different models. And just to be upfront with everybody, so Claude is my sort of usual go-to, although I still use ChatGPT quite a bit, just because it has a lot of the history and the context behind things that I'm doing. So I did run it through both of those LMs. Also, too, I went out and got some feedback from real people, like real listeners. And I don't think we have a lot of that in here, but just, anecdotally, all the things that we've been talking about and we're going to talk about in terms of what seems to be working, and even some of the things that aren't working, it all came loud and true with AI, right? So they sort of said the same sort of thing. But the first thing that really came out and kind of jumping off of that dynamic between you and I, there's always a driver. So, and you've driven a lot of the episodes, right? So you're the opener, you're talking about the data, those kinds of things. And then we both provide a perspective, but there's sort of like this insight closer sort of thing, like big ideas or a few ideas. That dynamic back and forth, it talked a lot about how it really liked that. I think one of the things it does mention quite a bit, though, is the fact that we do need to be a little more defined on the roles, right? It actually mentioned the two episodes, which I think are our best episodes, which is Vegas, which you're going to show some data later on, which is clearly the most viewed or listened to episode. Also Hallmark, which I clearly drove Hallmark and you clearly drove Vegas, but there was clear role definition there between who was driving it and who was closing the episode. So I thought that was an interesting sort of insight out of it as well. The next framework around how we do episodes, and it pointed out that that's really important to remain tight in your structure. We've got an opening, and the opening has data about the organization, its background. It actually highlighted, really likes the did you knows, the little in behind, the things you'd never heard about. One of the things it brought up was the on running shoes and the hose, like people cutting those. That's a known thing, but not everybody would know that. And actually, anecdotally, I did hear from listeners, and they said there's some really neat things, like some of the Vegas things, like the sign and stuff. I didn't know there wasn't any trademark for you could take pictures of it and use it, manipulate it, and do whatever you want. Things like that, people just kind of thought was interesting. The opening, they thought our dynamic discussion was really good, but the most important part was how we close it. Right? What are our ideas? I think some episodes, to be quite frank, we've probably drifted a little bit in sometimes with that, and we haven't got enough specific with it, right? But really landing that at the end. And you and I have talked about it as well, is the combination of the podcast and the newsletter is really kind of what makes it work. So the newsletter is really the very specific prescription to the CEO, like do these things, go do this next. And that was something that AI really brought up quite a bit, is like be really prescriptive to the CEO. If I listen to this on Friday, what's the thing I'm actioning on? What am I going to do Monday? Right? Could be a big strategic thing, could be some tactical things. So that was really important. So it's kind of more important the beginning, the setup, and the end, and how you land it.
So a quick plug on that. So go to unsolicitedbizadvice.com and sign up for the newsletter so that you get that CEO letter, and also you're notified when we post a podcast, so that you get that it's tied together nicely for you. Because I do put it on LinkedIn, but I think you really kind of need that letter afterwards to kind of tie it together with, oh yeah, I remember they said that in the podcast, and now I see where they're saying it in a more concrete way.
Well, interesting enough, Ian, when it ran through AI, I just ran the transcripts of the episodes, and it brought it up as one of the key ideas to do was to start some kind of newsletter. They're really popular. So I'm like, oh, well, here, we already have. Here's all the, I gave them all your previous ones before we started the pod and the current ones. And yeah, I got a kind of double thumbs up. And I should share, they actually gave some ideas on even that as well, but they said this is excellent is kind of what the sort of the overall, again, like most AI is giving you like, great job, Steve.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. One more slide just about content. This was kind of the bigger deep dive. What are the things that it really liked, and what are the things that it sort of said we could probably improve on as well? The big thing was that strong point of view, right? It mentioned the fact that we have strong credibility running businesses, doing these kinds of things. That really strong point of view about what's going on. One of the examples it brought up was Jaguar, and how we were both saying it's an executive problem, Lululemon, about like this is just ripping apart the organization, the CEO trying to destroy the board. That just is never good for the organization. So that strong point of view is really good as well. On the things that we really need to improve on, or the stronger we are on the research and the analysis of the research, the better the episode. So Vegas was really, really strong. I thought we did a great job with Hallmark. I did that one, but I thought we did a good job with that one as well. And both of those got high marks around it, right? So interesting enough, I thought we did a great job with Jaguar, but it got lower marks in terms of the research synthesis, which I thought was quite interesting as well. That drifting, that's just both of us, probably me so more where I like to talk and keeping it tight. And that's where it was suggesting we both keep each other honest, right? So we, jump in and pull the other person back when they drift a little bit.
I also think it's sometimes maybe we're almost too polite to each other. It's like, I think to the point that you had on the slide previous around roles. If I'm opening, you're closing. We're not both closing.
You're going to talk about acquired, and then we're both going to talk about some of our favorite ones. But it actually says we're somewhere between acquired and pivot. The acquired part of it, to your point about really keeping each other honest and sort of maybe not being totally polite. But part of that too is acquired, like they do multiple takes, like they record, and it's a 4-hour episode. They do multiple takes. They actually did an episode on themselves. I listened to it before we did this. And the number of takes and the number of edits they do, like they record to get 4 hours, like they record like 10 or 12 hours. And they're ruthless in the editing phase. And both of them are really, really clear on making sure that their roles are really tight. All in all, I think all of these things, I think we keep making them better every time. I think we're getting more comfortable with it. So I don't think it was like anything here is a super surprise. The people that I talked to said very, very similar things as well. And by the way, just about everybody, and they're probably telling me this because I'm talking to them, everybody who's listened to it has said it really is good. Like it's a really unique thing, and can't wait till we get to episode 20 and how much better it's going to be.
Very,
Anyway,
very
that's
cool.
kind of
Very
it.
cool analysis, Steve. I really like how you use like multiple LLMs as well. You didn't just default to one. You double checked it against multiple LLMs. Very cool. Very cool analysis. I'm going to jump in a little bit about the industry of podcasting, I suppose we can call it that. It's really moved to YouTube. I remember even when we were first thinking about doing this podcast, and we were meeting with some other potential hosts at the time. I'm not gonna name anybody, and they were like, "Well, I don't want to do YouTube. I want to just do it on Spotify." And I didn't have a very strong opinion about that one way or the other. But it's very clearly that YouTube is strongly growing, and even though right now it's like kind of neck and neck with Spotify, YouTube is the lead right now, and so. It's good that we do it on YouTube. I think we could probably tighten up the editing, and we've actually taken steps with that. Your daughter, who's in film school, is going to take a crack at doing some editing, which would absolutely be better than whatever it is that I'm doing right now. But I think that's really exciting. And if we look at our own podcast, over-index like double on that. So we're 64% of our streams are coming through YouTube and only 12% are coming through Spotify. And I think it's a lot easier to be discovered on YouTube.
Ian, I tell you, it's because we're two good-looking individuals. People want to look at
I'm
us.
telling you, Steve, the idea that you're the beefcake man. You do a couple of episodes shirtless, and right away the number's gonna pop.
We're not. We'll do one of those flash takes where it's like, did you see
Oh
it?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Not that I've seen those. That wouldn't end up in my.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, not that I'm looking at that content.
I'm
I
not
will
looking at
say
anything
though,
like
like
that. I
when
don't
you
even know
told
how it
about
ended
the
up.
YouTube,
What is it? Should we just be puppies and kittens? I don't know.
puppies are good. Puppies are. But when you talk about this YouTube thing, I honestly, I was skeptical on that one as well. And then I did look it up myself, and I'm like, this is wild how it's becoming a visual medium. Podcasting is becoming a visual medium.
Well, I think what's interesting is that, and I saw a different stat on this, that the amount of time spent on a YouTube video versus the amount of time spent on Spotify. And so YouTube is about discoverability because people spend on average about 15 minutes on your YouTube video of your podcast. But then when they go to Spotify, they spend like as much as an hour. So you kind of have to get discovered on YouTube. They need to think that the content is interesting enough to now subscribe to you on, Spotify, and then listen to your full episode.
It'll be interesting to see. I don't know if you noticed, but Netflix now offers podcasts.
Yes. Yeah.
Where do you listen to podcasts?
Mm-hmm.
Primarily for me, it's driving or when I'm out for a run. Those are the two primary spots. Or like I might be up north at the cottage and I'm cutting grass or whatever. I'm out tinkering or something. I'll put a podcast in, but primarily it's driving. So obviously I'm not visually watching something. So I find this YouTube thing fascinating. And I think that's why it's important to show stats and data. One of my favorite podcasts is called the AI Daily Brief. It's like a 20-minute tight, but the visuals that podcaster provides are fantastic. Like I use them all the time in presentations, and I have to sit and watch it. I can't just listen to it.
The stats bear that as well. It's about what people are doing, and they're multitasking, right? Like you're running, or you're in the car. I'm in the car, or I'm at the gym. And so it is when you're doing something else. That's what makes podcasts so great, is that you don't have to be watching them. But I do discover them on YouTube. I'll admit that I do. I'll be, if I'm on YouTube and I see one I haven't subscribed to yet, that's the first time I'm going to try it. Whereas I never try new podcasts on Spotify.
Spotify is getting really good. I turned on their AI functionality where it's just watching and listening and then giving me recommendations that are curated. And I do it. I started with the music, but I'm now doing it with the podcast as well. It's really good. I'm discovering things constantly.
And then in terms of regionality, no surprise. I mean, we're based in Canada, so 72% Canadian. And we're focused on companies that are global. We're not focused just on Canadian companies, but this is where we reside. So but almost 30% American. That's not bad. And I would like to get it to like sort of a 50-50 if we could over time.
I think we're going to get a massive bump in the European Union.
That's right. Well, suddenly have Portugal show up. That would be great. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how we're doing. This is our cumulative streaming. We get a little bump with every single episode we do, but if we wanted this linear progression to sort of increase faster, we would need to up our number of episodes, right? And so the fastest way to do that would be to lean into doing it a little bit more regularly. But the great news is that in terms of episode by episode performance, generally speaking, the progression is positive. So On was our first episode. And what this chart is showing for those people who are seeing it on YouTube is it's showing the first 30 days of each of our podcasts with the daily stream as a cumulative. You can see our best performer was Vegas. And we got sort of this bump by sort of, let's say, day 3, and then it kept on growing all the way for 30 days. But generally speaking, On was our first episode, Jaguar was our second episode, then we did Las Vegas, then it was Hallmark, then Lululemon. And Lululemon is our second best performing episode, and it's our most recent episode. So I think this is great. Generally speaking, we're every episode we're getting a little bit better, and our performance is improving. Generally speaking, the trend is we do better over time.
Ian, what's your, do you have any insight to why Vegas and Lululemon? Like very different subjects.
I think we've got confounding variables here. I think it's two things. I think it's one is that we're building a listener base over time, and so people are giving us a chance again. But it's also how popular these topics were. They were more timely. Not popular isn't the word. It's timely. People
Yeah.
were talking about Vegas online. People were talking about Lululemon, and in these other cases, we just sort of chose companies that we found interesting, which is I still think a viable thing to do. But I think if we focus on slightly more timely topics and companies, we'll probably get better listenership. What do you think, Steve? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree too. I think just, things that are in a sort of a topical nature, people are going to gravitate to, especially if they're still, like, I still think we're in discovery mode, where people are discovering the pod. And, obviously you and I are probably sending it out to people, and you're doing a lot of work on LinkedIn and sending it out with it as well. But I think it's just the timely nature of it. Like Lululemon is obviously in the news a lot because it's sponsored the Canadian Olympics to all the outfits, whether you like them or not. It's out there, little logos out there. And not to mention, their previous founder, Chip Wilson, is obviously, he's kind of feels like he's in self-destruct mode, or sort of trying to self-destruct the company. And then obviously with Vegas, like it does appear to be an ongoing thing. And I think the whole tourism thing across the United States is becoming a growing concern, not just with Vegas. So I think both those subjects are incredibly timely. I agree with you too. Like there's some great lessons from the Jaguar. I think that's something where we really need to pull out more. And again, that was something that AI cited as well. There was some just really neat ideas and some good strategic thoughts in some of the other episodes. So maybe those are used as more clips. There's a dynamic I think that happens when you're in person as well that I thought was really fun and interesting. Call me the old guy in the room, whatever, but you just get visual clues in a face to face when you're in the room together. You just can't pick up online.
In terms of promotion, I really only promote on LinkedIn, and I haven't really spent much in the way of any kind of money. I think I boosted a couple of my posts like $100 or something, like nothing really. But in terms of last 90 days, 191,000 impressions we've gotten through LinkedIn. Las Vegas got 29,000 impressions. Just a general one about the podcast overall got 28, almost 29,000 impressions. And then it dropped precipitously here. My third best rated post around the podcast was Lululemon, just under 10,000 impressions. But pretty good impressions in terms of LinkedIn. Over 90,000 members have been reached across these posts. But I've really just stuck to LinkedIn, and partly because it's B2B and partly just because it's the platform I know how to use. Our next episode is going to be Lovable, which I think is a very interesting topic.
I'm so excited about that one. Yeah, so excited about that one.
Steve, why don't we talk about like our own favorite podcasts a little bit? Because I grabbed a couple of numbers, but I wanted to hear, what are your favorite podcasts?
Yeah, so these are yours.
Yeah, these are mine. So my favorite, Diary of a CEO, Acquired, My First Million, and the All In Podcast. And those,
Yeah.
and I think if I was to say which ones do I spend the most time listening to, probably number one would be All In Podcast. Number two would be My First Million. And then Acquired would be I listen to the least, but that's just because there's fewer episodes. Like it only comes out like
Yeah.
once a month, right?
And you got to invest a lot of time with the Acquired. They are lengthy. So yeah, we definitely cross over. Like All In and Acquired are two of my favorites. Again, kind of the context of where you listen to those things. Acquired is I'm driving up to the cottage. And that's usually the go-to one because I can get through at least half an episode. These are 4-hour episodes sometimes, right? So their pace is so good. They did a whole Microsoft, like where Bill grew up and his parents, and they give all this foundational context, and it's so relevant, at least I feel it is in terms of like my career path. I think all young people should listen to these things because I think it is very helpful. But Acquired and All In for sure. Diary of a CEO. My wife actually is a big fan of that one, but less so on that. And My First Million, I have to say, I don't think I've listened to any of the episodes, which is kind of interesting because I've heard it's really, really good as well. Other than the ones we cross over, the AI Daily Podcast, which is like my go-to, and I'm religious on that one. This guy, I don't know how he does it. He pumps out 20-minute episodes every single day. It's always topical. It's always starts off with news, gets into a subject, has a point of view, has the slides. Clearly, he's got AI helping him create the things. Boom, 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 closes it on to the next thing. He's got advertising, sponsorship. It drives to his consulting business. That's his real purpose behind doing it. It's just a really, really tight thing. It's a perfect example of if you want the podcast to be your flywheel in driving business and constantly sort of driving those things because it's driving to his business. Then he learns a bunch of different things working with different companies, which then he feeds into his content and the podcasts relate to it. He just keeps driving that. So it's brilliant. But, like, I am a fan of Scott Galloway, so I like Pivot. I listen to it less and less now, which is interesting. I listen to a lot of Scott Galloway's podcast, but some of my issue is Scott's drifting away from, primarily being his analysis thing because he's getting into, obviously, with the political environment in the U.S., and he's obviously, pretty strong Democrat and doesn't like the current administration. I agree with some of his points. I disagree with it. That's okay. But I want to go back to when they really talked about the tech companies and the problems they were seeing within those. I thought that was really good. So I listened to it less and less. But then I also have I love Smartless, Will Arnett and Jason Bateman, and I just think it's brilliant. That's like entertainment to me, but they're really fun stuff when they have the guests. The guest thing is really important, and I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later on.
Yeah.
But you know what my number one podcast is? I couldn't believe it. You know how Spotify does a year-end wrap? I don't know
Yeah.
if you get that or not. My number one podcast was by far is The Rest is History. It's these two British guys take
Oh,
on
yes. Yeah,
the
I've heard
Roman
of it.
Empire.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do like 45-minute episodes. They'll do the Roman Empire and they'll do it over like 6 episodes. And I guess I am a bit of a history guy, but they'll just dissect all these things. And they do have guests on quite a bit as well. I just find it really interesting. It's fascinating. Something for us to take away as lessons learned. They do crossover to like business or finance or like it's really interesting. They get brought into these other areas to give historical context to a situation that might be going on. So they do this kind of interesting crossover and they'll have other podcast people that have nothing to do with history on their pod as well, which is kind of interesting.
But I agree with you. I forgot that I listened to Pivot. I had listened to Pivot. I do read Scott Galloway's newsletter,
Yeah.
but I stopped listening to the podcast and switched to the newsletter because you're right. It's not, listen, it's not about what his politics are. That's not what I was listening to his podcast for.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I wanted a business podcast. If I want a political podcast, I'll listen to a political podcast. And so maybe he picked up some listeners, although I doubt it. Maybe he picked up some listeners who were looking for a political podcast. But what I like about these podcasts are they stick to business. And that's what, and I like that that's what we've decided to do. I don't want to
Agreed.
go off into the culture wars or politics or any of that stuff. I want to stick to business because I think I think I'm a little sick of the rest of it, to be honest. I like the escapism. Yeah.
Obviously, probably the most popular podcast in the world is Joe Rogan. And he touches on culture, business, all kinds of things in any given episode. But I still think his big secret is he is actually a pretty good interviewer, has a strong opinion, and he gets great guests. That's what I
100%.
think it is.
And it's also success begets success, right?
Yeah.
And as soon as you are successful, I mean, look at what some of these companies have been able to parlay their podcasts into. I mean, the All In podcast, David Sachs became the AI czar for the United States.
Yeah.
I mean, they were already billionaires, but still,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
because of the podcast that he got that role. And they've had massive outsized impact as a result of their podcast. I'm not, I mean, let's get into this now. I'm not looking for that. I don't want to be the AI czar of anything. I'm happy to just be the AI czar of making sure that I get my recycling out on Thursday. And I'm barely holding that role down well, according to my wife. I guess, it's hard to say. I think partly it's, you and I have both had successful exits. We're both angel investors in a number of companies, and we haven't really talked a lot about the companies that we angel invest in. Actually, you have a meeting with one of the ones I'm investing with tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm looking forward to that. Super, super popular topic right now.
I'm not really sure of the exact outcome. I'm not, I wasn't thinking, oh, we're gonna sell for $100 million or even $27 million, like my first million, and we'll get into some of those case studies. Very interesting. But what you do see is two things. One, everyone who does it, everyone who has a successful one, like Diary of a CEO or The Acquired, these people love it. It's kind of a hobby for the type of person that doesn't really have a traditional hobby. Like I really enjoy doing the research on these companies and learning these things about Lululemon or Hallmark. Like I found that incredibly fascinating. And it's really fun to sort of have this debate with you about what should they do next. And so part of it is just, honestly, it's just a hobby for people who don't normally have hobbies.
I actually wrote down what my top 3 reasons why, because we were talking about that. The first one is it's the research part of it. Like when you dig into these organizations and you learn more about them, I just really enjoy it. And I like the business context. It keeps me sort of, sharp with that and helps me with other things I'm doing as well. But I just really like the research part of it as well. Like I just find that really fascinating. And that could be like that history thing. I think maybe I've got a little bit of that with it. The second thing is I love thinking through what the ideas are going to be or a strategy that's going to be. Like I would say in my days at Delvinia, and even when we sold to the larger company Sago, I mean, my role was product guy, innovation guy. Like that was I wasn't an operator per se. In terms of operating, I had business units that I was responsible for, but I was much more of like the strategic guy. And I think you probably fell into that a lot in terms of things you did as well. So, I love when I out walking the dog or just even driving in the car and I'm thinking about this podcast and I'm thinking about, okay, we're going to talk about Lululemon, and we know what their problems are. And because you've probably provided me a bunch of data and background and trying to think about what are ideas that they could do. What did I do in the past or what would I have done if I was in that situation? I love that strategy part of it. I feel it just keeps me really sharp. It's also great conversational things as well. But I'd say the third thing is I love your counterpoints to things. You have a very different way of how you look at things and tackle things. And I sit there and think to myself, geez, I wish I would have thought of that. Or, geez, that's a really interesting point. How do I counter that point? So that to me, I think that's really important. I definitely wouldn't want to do this on my own. I think the last thing, it's not a fourth point, but I think it was something actually Scott Galloway said a long time about young people. And I agree with this. Pick your medium and get really good at your medium. Communication is absolutely key. And I stress this with my kids heavily. Mine are 23 and 20 years old. One's in film and television, so they need to be a good communicator. The other one is in leadership roles and where he works, and he's like a project manager essentially. So he needs to lead teams. Communication is so important. Pick your medium. If PowerPoint's your medium, use PowerPoint. Whatever it is. I find this podcasting thing, it's almost like it's my medium that's been waiting for me for a long time, right? So I think it's just a fantastic format to get thoughts and ideas out.
Yeah, and I'm actually at the point where I'm like, we're moving towards this world where AI is so capable now of creating a lot of the documentation that traditional consultants sell. you
Oh
know,
yeah. Yeah.
and it's, I'm doing a lot of exploration in this, and I'm sure you are too. There's been a step improvement just recently in terms of skills and agents in Manus, for instance, but also Claude, obviously. Unbelievable step improvement in terms of the outputs that these LLMs are now capable of doing. If you want to stay relevant, you need to improve the way you deliver information as well. I mean, if people are watching 30-minute podcasts for entertainment and actually enjoying it and learning, you've sat through enough 1 hour or 2 hour or 3 hour PowerPoint presentations in your career. And often half the audience is sort of like barely paying attention. They're thinking about what they're going to have for lunch when this meeting finally breaks. Right?
That speaks to your example of that. I think I've given some of those 3 hour PowerPoint presentations, but the
Yeah.
one thing about the podcast medium is you can pause and come back. Like it is that type of medium where it's like I'm going to listen to half, and I'm going to pick up the other half later on. I make the joke all the time. Yeah, the world does not need another podcast when we started this, but again, it really is an incredibly powerful. I can totally understand why it's become like the go-to, and you're seeing like huge TV personalities moving away from this, and also too, it's well documented too. A production on like CNN or a major network is tens of millions of dollars, if not $100 million, to produce these things, and that's just paying the talent. These guys go and do a podcast. Like, what's a mic and a computer and internet? It's literally next to nothing, right? So your margins increase significantly when you start talking about ad revenue or sponsorship revenue on these things.
At some point, you kind of have to say, okay, but if I'm going to invest more time or more money or both into this, there has to be some kind of ROI. We're both business guys. Like, we can only go so far. And I think it's twofold. I think it's the value that you could theoretically build. I don't think we're ever going to be worth $100 million like Diary of a CEO. He's got a British accent. He's super hot. Although, I did
I'm
say,
not taking my shirt off. I'm not taking my shirt off, Ian.
I'll get there. But, we're not getting there, I don't think. But the point is, there is something here. This is a more valuable space than I actually thought it was when we started doing this. I didn't say, hey, Steve, let's start doing a podcast. It's going to be worth $100 million. I think it doesn't matter. The point is that there is a market. There actually is a market. There actually is a large market. And if we look at Diary of a CEO, like the current valuation is $425 million. Now that's Steven.com. So that's not just the podcast. It's the podcast plus the newsletter plus everything else. But we are in a fight for attention right now, particularly with things like AI slop coming out there. I kind of hate that term because some AI stuff's pretty good, but AI slop is what people are used to hearing. And I think we're in a fight for attention on every front. And the better you are at using the mediums for communication that are favored by the people, the better luck you are going to have in terms of actually getting that attention and making your voice heard and meaningful.
I'm not going to go in order here. To me, that guest strategy seems to be pretty much so a standard thing across some of the most successful pods out there, is that the idea of getting guests, and by the way, you're extending your audiences by bringing those guests on. You're getting different opinions. You're not just hearing your and I's voices on things. I think that is really interesting. Interesting fact is that we're lining up another guest for another topic, and we're also doing Lisbon and doing it with George, which is another guest. So we're actually kind of leaning into this before. So I think the guest aspect of it, I think, is really important. I think that leans into more just a general sort of content, keeping the framework the same, but I think the guest thing is really important. I think that'll come back to the timing of when we really start to see that, hey, we've got something here that we can truly monetize. I think those two things go hand in hand, but I know you want to talk a little bit about both investment and platforms.
We need to prove an audience before we can justify spending significantly more on the podcast. But I do think it's worth talking about where we would invest in the podcast. Getting some help to do some of these things so we could get more episodes done. The hardest part is the editing for sure. So if we get some help on the editing, I think that could improve our pacing and get us more episodes out. A guest strategy would definitely be one of those ways to grow our audience. And then monetization, an interesting thing about monetization is there's different ways to monetize. And so you can try to monetize directly through the platforms, or you can partner with companies that will monetize for you. So basically, they'll insert ads. But the ones that have been successful do it themselves. So the ones that have been successful actually approach potential sponsors themselves and have them sponsored directly. So they're not paying a big commission out to an agency that plays a middleman. And I think I'd rather wait and do the direct monetization than try to make $5 or $10 in the interim.
Yeah, agreed. Well, I think the other thing with monetization, and I think you've talked about this as well, is UBA is, I think, bigger than the sum of the parts. So like if you kind of look at right now, it's a content portal, if you will. Like, so you've got your newsletter and then we've got the podcast. But the idea of being able to provide business advice to organizations on different topics. Obviously, I'm running some other things as well, but I think there's potentially something with that. Much like what I mentioned before about the AI Daily podcast, like that's how he drives revenue is through that. And there's also a number of examples out there of organizations that smaller agencies that's their primary vehicle for driving business through the organization is through podcast speaking, those kinds of things. So I do think there's an element of that. I mean, that we may have not have leaned on enough. I know you've got a number of things going on beyond the board work, and both of us are getting approached to help organizations with different things. So maybe UBA has a much larger or a longer life beyond sort of just the podcasting. That might be just the vehicle to get our voice out there, but there could be a business opportunity for more consulting work, or who knows, right? There's also mass consolidation happening with many of the podcasts, as industries do. We saw this in the market research industry where everybody in their mom and pa shops everywhere started building out research platforms, and there just became a glutton of them. And then you had large organizations, private equity back, come in and buy them up. Delvinia was bought, or we sold our assets through that. And that's how we sort of, monetized or cashed out, if you will, our business, right? So that's happening in the podcast space as well, where you're seeing a tremendous amount of that.
We'll have to have a provable audience, but I think to your point, it's like Netflix, HubSpot. There's a bunch of different networks, or for lack of a better term, networks that are buying up podcasts and then consolidating them into their networks. Really interesting time to be looking at this. The latest stats that I saw said that about 50% of podcasts ever make it past 4 episodes. So, you have to stick with it. There has to be some longevity there. And I can see why some people would quit, because it's actually quite a bit of work. And you're not necessarily seeing those listenership numbers like spiking right away, because it takes time. And I think that's a good reason why it's good to have stats and track any business that you're in. We've been able to see the build across episodes, and so that you're going to be that much better off after 20 episodes than you are after 4, because you see the build even after 5.
Yeah, but we're in a probably pretty enviable position where I have a very good friend of mine that's running a podcast. He just started. He's about 5 or 6 episodes in as well, but he's using it to drive leads and connect with new people inside of or outside of his organization that he can drive into the business. He has very specific goals with it, and not that he's frustrated with the results so far, but and he's a pretty patient guy, but he's getting nervous, right? Versus you and I, it's like, yeah, we're gonna keep going away at this thing. I agree with you. We need to get sharper and better and those kinds of things with it, which we will, and I think we are. But we've got time, which is a pretty enviable position, really.
Yeah, we're not doing this to try to generate business tomorrow, or we don't have to necessarily interview clients or any of those things. We're doing it to try to make the best podcast we can, which is, you're right. I think that's an enviable situation.
Or It could be our very last episode the minute you get me to take my shirt off, and that's it. That's the final.
That's no, that's when it takes off. That's when we explode
It
on the scene.
skyrockets.
I'm picturing a David
Remember, my
Hasselhoff.
mom listens to this. My mom listens, or she watches too, but she listens.
Yo, remember when David Hasselhoff would slow-mo run in the beach, Steve? That is the image I have in my head.
That's not the image I got in my mind.
That's how we start the pod. And I'm telling you, triple, quadruple our listenership like that.
We've actually never given a plug to the folks that did the opening audio piece as well.
Sticks and Stones. Yeah, Sticks and
There you go.
Stones. My godsons, Sticks and Stones, they're a successful. They've been touring with LA Guns all over the U.S. I mean, multiple tours. They're an amazing rock band, and they were nice enough to actually do our theme song as the intro, and that's been really cool. I love it. So.
Just the fact that you and I hadn't even talked about this, so you didn't know that I was a recovering heavy metal head. I still am a heavy metal guy. So the fact that when you first played the intro for me, I was like, this is like awesome. I'm like, you had me at hello, and then you really had me.
I'm so glad you're pumped about this. I'm really pumped about it. So looking forward to Lisbon. Lovable is going to be an awesome episode.
Feedback is welcomed, and we absolutely use it. Please, keep it coming and let us know.